It's recording.
Okay, yeah, I think we can get started here. Good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you are. And welcome to the Organic Transitions Technical Assistance webinar. So let's get started here. Just wanted to let everyone know that this webinar will be recorded, and it is being recorded right now. And we are asking each of you who has a question to submit that in the Q&A box, not the chat box, but the Q&A box, so that we can answer that at the end of the presentation. Each of you will receive a copy of the recording for this webinar. So, and also you will get a copy of our slides. Next slide for our non-discrimination, Catherine, go ahead.
In accordance with federal civil rights law and U.S. Department of Agriculture, USDA civil rights regulations and policies, the USDA, its agencies, offices, and employees, and institutions participating in or administering USDA programs are prohibited from discriminating against based on race, color, national origin, religion, sex, gender identity, including gender expression, sexual orientation, disability, age, marital status, family parental status, income derived from a public assistance program, political beliefs, or reprisal or retaliation for prior civil rights activity in any program or activity conducted or funded by USDA. Not all bases apply to all programs. Remedies and complaint filing deadlines vary by program or incidents. The slide contains contact information for individuals with disabilities to request reasonable accommodations, and language access services will be provided to limited English proficient individuals upon request, and that anyone wishing to file a complaint can utilize the phone number, fax number, or postal mailing address listed on this slide.
Okay, thank you, Catherine. And before we start here, I think we would like to introduce our NIFA Organic Agriculture team, so that you know who are the people behind this program, this Organic Transitions program. My name is Matthew Ngowajo. I just go by Matt. I'm a National Science Liaison with NIFA, and I have been working with this program for over 10 years now. Steve?
Hi, I'm Steve Smith, National Program Leader for Animal Production Systems. I've been with NIFA for approaching 15 years now. Most of that time I've been associated with the organic programs. So thank you all for being here and look forward to our conversation.
And my name is Catherine Bonnert. I'm a program specialist and in the plant production division. I have been at NIFA for 3 years now, and I'm a program specialist on the organic programs.
Yeah, and the three of us represent the NIFA Organic Agriculture team. And for this presentation, we will be jumping each of us in and out. And we did it on purpose so that you can, put a face behind the email when you write to any of us. And sometimes people ask, who should I contact if I need more details on the program? My answer will be any of us three, or even better, you can send an email to all three of us, and whoever is available will jump in and answer your questions. So next slide. This is a long list of the topics that we will cover today. We'll start with a quick overview of NIFA, then we will jump into this specific program, the Organic Transitions, and then we'll talk about the details of the request for applications, that is the RFA. You hear us talk a lot about RFA, that is a request for application. We talk about the proposal evaluation process, and then end with a few additional information and resources. Next. Here is an overview of NIFA. Next slide. NIFA is the National Institute of Food and Agriculture. We are the extramural science funding agency within USDA, and we fit within the research, education, and economic mission area. We invest in and support initiatives that ensure the long-term viability of agriculture. NIFA provides funding and strategic leadership for programs that ensure groundbreaking discoveries in agriculture-related sciences and technologies that those reach the people who can put them into practice. And in our case, want to make sure that those discoveries are put in the hands of the organic industry. Next slide. So I know we are here talking about the organic transitions, but NIFA covers more than just organic transition. We have a broad range of programs in different areas. You see a small list of those areas here on the slide. So if you have an idea on any of those topics, share with us. We will tell you whether that idea fits or the best program for your ideas. So we are more than just organic agriculture. Next. Now coming down to this specific program, Organic Transition, go to next slide. What is the purpose of the program? This organic transition, and we will be referring to this as ORG. So when we say ORG program, we mean Organic Transitions Program. It seeks to solve critical organic agriculture issues, priorities, or problems through the integration of research, education, and extension activities. And this specific program is focusing more on those facilities that are adopting organic practices. We just finished off early on today about ORAI that was focusing on those who have already adopted the organic seal. But in this case, this program focuses on those who are still in the transition to organic agriculture. Next slide. Now, let's talk a little bit about the priorities for 2024 for this specific RFA that we are talking about now. We have 4 broad priorities for the program this year. And all of that is listed in the RFA. And you can go and find the details on each of these priorities on page 7 and 8 of the RFA. So I'm not going to rephrase all of them. I just want to quickly summarize each of those. The first priority is on documenting and understanding the effects of organic practices on things like soil health, soil fertility, greenhouse gas mitigation, biodiversity. And we also want to understand the impact of organic practices on pests like weed, diseases, dynamics, or climate change. So that is the first priority. The second is about helping us better understand the organic system. So we are looking for projects that will develop or improve technologies or methods or new models and metrics to document or describe and optimize the ecosystem services of organic agriculture. So this is about, again, if you want to help us better understand the impact of the organic systems on ecosystem services, it will fit on the priority 2. Priority 3 is pretty specific. It's for developing cultural practices and other allowable alternatives to substances recommended for removal from the National Organic Program list. An example of that is, we do not allow antibiotics anymore. So if you are developing an alternative to antibiotics, it will fit under priority 3. If you are developing an alternative to methionine for poultry production, it will fall under this priority 3. Now, priority 4 is pretty broad, as you can see there. Anything that has to do with overcoming barriers to organic transition. So, very broad. Let's pick an issue. Tell us why farmers are not engaging in organic transition because of that issue. It would fit in this priority 4. Next slide. So these are some other requirements of the program. So the organic system fieldwork must be done on certified organic land and or facility. However, for this specific program, we do, if a project is appropriate or depending on the objective of the specific project, we can accept comparisons that include land and facilities in transition to organic, or even land that is not managed using organic practices. Now, if land or facilities in transition are to be used, we need a clear documentation from a certifying agent telling us that there is a plan in place for that land to be transitioned, or it is already being transitioned to organic. And to us, a land is not organic unless it has received the USDA organic certification. We receive a lot of questions about whether they can use also land that is conventional. Well, again, we want to be very specific here. The use of conventional production technology for comparative purposes or proof of concept is allowed if cross-contamination with organic and traditional treatment is prevented. So you cannot just use a product, let's say an insecticide that is not allowed in organic, to go and spray that in an organic system if it's going to contaminate, or near an organic system if that is going to contaminate the organic system. So we also want to make our applicant know that we have two organic programs, ORAI and these organic transitions. We do not want people to submit exactly the same project or project with significant overlap for those two programs the same year. Next. And this is another piece here that is very important for this program. And you can find that on page 13 of the RFA. Who is eligible to submit application to this program? This is a program with a very narrow eligibility. Only colleges and universities can submit applications here. And that's probably one of the reasons why you hear that the success rate of this program is pretty high. It is also because it has a very narrow eligibility. However, if you are not a university or a college, you can still work with those who are eligible and be a subcontractor or a sub-awardee for that program. So we do not prevent NGOs, private entity to work on the program, but we just require that the lead institution should be a college or university. Next. Okay, we also hear about the limitation on the number of applications for eligible institutions. We don't have a limit on that. We don't even have a limit on the number of applications for individual PDs or co-PDs. And we don't have a limit on the number of awards per institution. If it happened that all good applications come from the same person within the same university, well, we will fund all of them. It's all based on scientific merit. However, we don't want to people to submit duplicate or predominantly overlapping application the same fiscal year to multiple NIFA program, whether it's organic transition and ORAI or any other NIFA program, we will disqualify those applications. Next.
Thank you, Matt. Would like to take a moment now and talk to you about the project types and grant types under this program. Really, there's only one project type and one grant type. These are, the call is for integrated projects, and we're only supporting standard grants. Though you'll notice the footnote there, this is an integrated program, but we do have a little bit of latitude to support research, education, or extension single function projects. if there's sufficient justification to do so. And we'll talk a little bit more about this in a subsequent slide. So next slide, please. As far as the duration and award sizes, these are a maximum $1 million awards for these integrated project proposals with durations of 1 to 4 years. And these will all be standard grant types. Next slide. By integrated project proposals, what we mean is they must include research and at least one additional element, education or extension, or all three. But that's really the definition of integrated, though, going back to those footnotes on the previous slide, this program must be integrated, but we do have the opportunity to support a few single function projects with sufficient justification to do so. So we have done a few of those in the past, not many. If I were gambling and had a project that did have an opportunity to include research and extension or education or all three, I would certainly place my bet there. But particularly in the extension arena, we have seen some that have come through very solidly and been funded as a single function. And I think that same opportunity exists for education. Next slide.
Yeah, and Steve, we have received a lot of questions from applicants about, these two programs, the OREI and the organic transitions, and they keep asking us, what is the best program for my research idea? And we tell them the common denominator for those two, if you are focusing on production efficiency, if you are focusing on making the production more profitable or on the competitiveness of the system, it surely will fit in any of those two programs, both OREI and ORG. Now, where the specifics are, if you are focusing on the organic transitions program, that is what we are talking about right now, it will be focusing more on ecosystem services of organic agriculture, things like, water, soil, pollinator, biodiversity, greenhouse gases, climate change, carbon sequestration. If you're interested in developing new model, like I just talked early on, new model to better understand those ecosystem services, or if you're focusing on barriers, major barriers to the transition to organic agriculture, that will be perfect for organic transitions. We have also added in this, which is what I show you, that was priority number 3, I think so, on the National Organic Program priorities on things like antibiotics alternative and methionine alternative. That would be typical topic for organic transitions. But OREI on the other side would be anything that has to do with operations that are already certified organic. If you are thinking about a conference proposal, go to OREI. Planning program is OREI. Curriculum development is OREI. So next, Steve, back to you.
Thank you, Matt. Now, a few things that we need to point out that are not fundable, and this is not a NIFA exclusive list of exclusions. This comes to us through our uniform guidance that governs the use of federal funds and particularly grants that move, or funds that move through grants in federal programs. They cannot be used to purchase land. They cannot be used to purchase farm equipment. There are some exceptions for specialized equipment that are required for the project's work, but in general, farm equipment is not allowed. Construction or renovation of buildings and facilities, not included. We do actually encourage international collaboration, but it has to be primarily, the benefit has to be primarily to the US as a result of that collaboration. So the extreme case on the negative side, I've had applications come in where they're wanting to do work on developing organic production of a crop that is not grown in the US. In this particular case, it was only being grown, I think it was in South Africa. And that one, just was outside the scope of this program. But if you have something that's need in the US and there is a strong international entity that does great work there that might be ahead of us, then by all means engage them and utilize them in your program. The other thing that we do not provide is direct assistance to producers. You know, there are federal agencies that do, Farm Service Agency does, NRCS does, but we do not. Now, what we will do is provide, call them honoraria, for cooperating or collaborating producers. They receive an expectation. We want you to compensate producers who are working with you as part of the project, but that's different than direct assistance to producers. Next slide, Catherine. You will find in the RFA, we get a lot of questions about this one, there is a requirement among all of our grant programs for matching dollar for all federal funds. However, NIFA may waive matching requirements if, in the case of organic transitions, the result of the project, while being of particular benefit to a specific agricultural commodity, and that the results are likely to be applicable to agricultural commodities generally. That qualifies. The other possible exclusion would be the project involves a minor commodity or the project deals with scientifically important research and the grant recipient is unable to satisfy the matching funds requirement. For our organic programs, that is the most common because although we do appreciate the scale and scope of organic agriculture and the growth that we've seen there, most of what we do would still numerically qualify as a minor commodity. So if you are struggling to do the match and you want to be considered for a waiver, please do put that request in your narrative. And that is the criteria that you would most likely qualify under. Now, in either case, whether you are able to provide the matching funds or not, that is not going to be a consideration as we do the evaluation of your project. Next slide, please.
Okay. I will take over and describe the application details and documents. So the RFA is available online on the funding opportunity page for this grant program. And then once you have the slides, they'll typically be done within 2 weeks after this presentation, and you'll be able to access the slides and click on the links directly, or you can just Google ORG NIFA funding opportunity page and that link will come up. Also, there are a couple documents that might be of interest to you regarding the OREI and ORG program synopsis, as well as frequently asked questions. The deadline for this program is 5 p.m. Eastern Time on March 7th, 2024, sorry. And then also all of the grant applications should be submitted through grants.gov. The total funding available for fiscal year 2024 is $7.5 million. The funding is available to the states. The program code is 112.E. The maximum funding per award is $1 million. And like Matt had described before, there is no limit on the number of proposals per institution nor awards per institution. This slide covers the key documents that should be included in your application. Your application must include a project summary or abstract within the project narrative that's limited to 21 pages. If it is a resubmission, you have an opportunity to provide a response to previous reviews. The limit for the pages on that is 3 pages, and it does not count toward the project narrative amount. The introduction does. So starting with the introduction, all of these things that are listed in underneath project narrative fall within that 21-page limit. So the introduction, the objectives, the approach, and the project timeline. If you want to request Centers of Excellence designation, your justification must also fall within that 21-page limit. So separate from the project narrative is the bibliography and reference list that does not count towards the narrative. You also need to include a data management plan. A mentoring plan is strongly recommended if the proposal requests funding for students or postdoctoral support. You need to include a budget and budget narrative, and there are a few other documents that you can see in the RFA for details on those. The application project narrative, like I said before, has a 21-page limit, and that is very strictly enforced. The line spacing is 1 or 1.5 for the application. The font should be no smaller than 10-point Times New Roman. And this applies also to the text figures and tables. The tables may be single spaced. And then applications exceeding the page limitation will be returned without review.
Thank you, Catherine. And as Catherine said, these projects do require a data management plan. That comes as a result of an executive order some years ago, and we are complying, and I think it's a very good idea. Investigators must provide detailed business and management plans up to 2 pages, so that's that level of detail. And that it must include the expected data type, the data format, how you're going to store that data and preserve it, how it'll be shared, what intellectual property protections might be put in place and for how long, but particularly public access. That was sort of the key point of the executive order, was to make this data available publicly. And to do that, we also need to know the roles and responsibilities of those who will be responsible for this data management plan. Clearly, you will need a little more detail than that. And so please do avail yourself of the link that's shown on the slide and get all of those extra details. Thank you. Next slide, please.
Okay. For the application submission, NIFA only accepts electronic submission of applications, and the NIFA grants application guide is available at that link. And application documents must be in portable document format or PDF to be accepted by NIFA. And this includes not only your narrative and budget justifications, but really the entire application. Grants.gov may allow for other formats, but unfortunately, our NIFA system does not recognize those, and so they will not be included in your submission. And we also request that you do not use third-party PDF builders.
Okay, let's talk about the evaluation process for this program. We told you that the program is evaluated using a peer panel review of experts. How does that work? Next slide, Catherine. So what happened to your application when it is submitted? Your proposal is reviewed by at least 3 reviewers with expertise in the proposed topic. So those people were selected. We usually select them, and when we receive those proposals, we make sure that we have people who are knowledgeable in the topic where you submitted your proposal. And we have a minimum of 3 that is required by law. Those 3 or more reviewers will provide individual reviews of each of the proposal based on the strength and the weaknesses of that proposal. And those written reviews will be used in our panel discussion. So we will convene a full panel with all the reviewers in one room to discuss each individual proposal that is submitted to the program. At the end of that discussion of the peer panel will come to a consensus, and we will rank those proposals based on their technical and scientific merit. Again, we will come to a consensus of the entire panel, and that will allow us to rank the proposal on the board, and will provide funding based on that ranking. Now, next slide. We know that this is a competitive process, and therefore we want to make sure that the criteria for that competition are fair and known by every applicant. And we have those criteria on page 23 of the RFA. The big chunk of the review criteria has to do with the technical merits of the project. in that technical merit, and you will see more details if you go in the RFA. We are looking at the degree of integration of the research, education, and extension. We want to see if the project will address priorities described early on, our priorities for 2024. We want to look at the methodology and make sure that will be, help us address the objective of the research. We want to look at the quality of monitoring or data management plan that Steve just talked about, and evaluation plan if that is part of the project. And we want to make sure also that the key personnel and the institutions are qualified to conduct the research that are being proposed. So that is one set of criteria, technical merit. The second one, next slide, will be on the relevance to the organic agriculture, organic transition purpose. We want to see a good justification for the problem that is being addressed. We want to make sure that there's evidence of appropriate involvement with interdisciplinary teams and institutional partners. We want to see the right people around at the table to address the issue. We want to see the extent to which stakeholders have been involved in either designing or implementing the program at the proposal. And we want to look at the probability that the project will be successful. So finally, for this specific program, we also want to make sure that the research will fill a knowledge gap that is critical to the development of organic agriculture. So that is very important to us, filling that knowledge gap. Next. Okay, how about the timeline? What happened when you submit your proposal? Usually, between the RFA and application due date, we usually allow between 1 to 2 months. So this year we were very lucky that the RFA was published a little earlier, so it allows you, the applicant, to have more time to write your proposal before the due date. After the due date, we will take about 2 to 3 months to get review, do the administrative review of the proposals, send them to our peer review system, and then conduct the panel review. After that, those who are recommended for funding, it would take another 1 to 2 months for them to finalize the award between NIFA and their institution. So overall, a competitive program takes about 3 to 5 months from the proposal due date to an award being made. And during that whole process, we will try to keep you informed, and we appreciate your patience as that process goes on. Next. Okay, how about any additional information, Steve?
Thank you. Next slide.
Okay, yeah, this next slide is just about, if anyone wants to know what project was funded by this specific program, you have a link there. If you click on that link, it will allow you to go and search and find all the projects that have been funded in the past. Yeah, next.
Thank you, Matt. I just want to draw your attention here at the tail end of this presentation to some upcoming events, or how to find those upcoming events. We do have an events calendar that can be found through that web link, and that includes deadlines, meetings, webinars. A lot of the things that we do will be found on that events calendar. If you are specifically looking for our proposed release calendar for requests for applications, you can find it through that link. Now, that's generally the date ranges are a little broad there because there's a lot of things of approval process of an RFA that we within our program area don't control. So that's our best estimation, but we do run into things like, appropriations coming late, and things like that that do tend to cause delays of one type or another. So be sympathetic, maybe be forgiving of us if we're not quite meeting that calendar, but much of the time we do a really nice job there. So please do use that link to your advantage. Next slide, please. And then resources that you will find useful. And I'll stress that they are very useful. Please do take the opportunity to look at these, because many of your questions can be answered here, and even questions you don't know to ask yet, you'll be prompted and be given an answer here. Certainly things like funding opportunities can be found through that first link. The competitive grants flowchart is just very informative because it sort of talks about the process that Matt described, but in a broader sense, you know, how NIFA goes through the grants process. The resources page, now there you're getting into the meat of the issue. Please do check out that link, because many of the things related to this program and grant types and so forth will be found there. Probably the one that few of you will read, but is very, very important, is the policy guide. So I think you'll avoid some challenges and heartaches if you will make yourself familiar with that. If you have questions about the indirect cost rates and so forth, we have a link for that. But the most important of all these links, in my opinion, is this guide for preparation and submission of applications via grants.gov. If you have not opened that and considered what's there, please do, because that will be a huge benefit to you. And then if you want some additional information on the grant, the awarded grants, Matt just referred to that on the last slide. And if you want our organic program page, it's listed there as well. So those are your resources. Next slide, please. And with that, there's our contact information. We'll open it up for questions.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Matt.
You know, and again, we want you to put your question in the Q&A box. And Catherine, we can take down this presentation so that we give us a chance to address any question that we may have. Okay.
Yep, and I can start looking through the question answer box here. So the first one, although it is not listed as a required document, it is permissible to attach bibliographies and references cited as a separate document in grants.gov, or is this required to be part of the 21-page project narrative? So
I think we covered that one.
That one might have come in before I mentioned it. So actually the bibliography and references cited is a very, very important required document. So you need to include that. And it is separate than the narrative, so it will not count against the 21 pages.
And if it is not included, we will return the application without review. It tells you how important it is.
It is very important. Okay. So if an integrated project is research and extension, is there a minimum amount of time that needs to be spent on one of the two sections? Example, 67% versus 33%.
Yeah, I know. There's a lot of confusion, especially for our applicant that navigate between AFRI and non-AFRI program. I know in AFRI, there are specific guidelines for budget distribution between research and other components. But for this specific program, Steve, we do not have that requirement, right?
That is correct. However, I will caution you, don't abuse that, because these are intended to be integrated proposals. And if you claim that it's integrated and 1% of your effort is allocated to extension or education, or even 5%, the risk you run is that the panelists will look at that and say, you didn't meet that requirement. That's too trivial. Even though we don't give the panelists a specific threshold either, they've got a really good sense for what is reasonable and what is not. And reasonability may come well before you hit 1/3. Especially if you're looking at the budgets, which are really hard to tease out if you really do a nice job of integration. The separation between research and extension, if there's a lot of coordination, collaboration between research and extension throughout the project, that's going to be hard to tease out in the budget, but it'll be really obvious in the descriptions that you give and the work that's being proposed. And the panelists really like that, as do Matt and I. So no hard and fast rules, but please don't abuse it.
Yeah, but also they have to know that we have people with expertise on research, on extension, and on education on the panel.
Yes.
So if you do put someone, let's say on extension, they give them a big amount of work that they need to do, and they only have like 5% of the budget. You know, I can easily see some of the panelists raising that issue. You know, the extension component is not being compensated fairly or things like that. So try to be balanced.
And oftentimes in a case like that, the panel will assume, oh, you haven't talked to, you're proposing this extension work, but you really haven't engaged or talked to your extension partners, or you'd recognize they can't do that for that amount of money. And that puts you at risk again. So just be careful, and yet I would encourage you that if you do truly involve research with education, research with extension, and you truly do a good job of integrating those, you aren't going to have a problem with that percentage concern.
To request a waiver of matching funds requirement, is there a specific form that a PD needs to fill out?
No, just in your narrative, do just include a statement that you would like to be considered for a waiver of matching funds and give your justification. And it can be just a really short segment, but do place it in the narrative there because there's not a special fund.
How much budget can be planned for international collaboration? We are planning to involve one researcher from Sweden.
That's again, we do not have an answer to that. But what I will say is, don't give 50% plus one of your budget to the international partner. We will know that you are they are using you maybe as a straw man to achieve their objective. So again, we do not have specific guidelines there, but just make sure that it's about scope of what they are going to be doing for you, and make sure that it reflects the scope of the work that they are doing. And again, like Steve said, make sure the ultimate person who will benefit from that collaboration is the U.S. organic industry. That is very important.
Another question, does education component include high school students as well, or only farmers? Thank you.
Oh, I like that question. By definition, education of farmers is extension. So it's really easy if you're thinking about, well, what's education, what's extension? It's all about the target audience. If your target audience is producers, that's extension. If your target audience is a student classroom type education, then it is education. Now that can include experiential learning. It can include actual curriculum development. There's a lot of things that can be called education, but like routine use of graduate students and on the research project, if it's not part of the scholarship, it doesn't count. Or you do you develop these great educational tools, but it's targeted toward producers. That's not education. So, just be mindful of what is which as you go forward with that. And let's see, what was the balance of the question? Oh, yes. So, the education component can include high school students. It can be K through 12. It's most commonly curriculum development for undergraduates and graduate students. And I won't say that it cannot include others. But if it's targeting producers, that's extension.
Exactly. And also, you got to be careful because if it's targeting high school student, there are a lot of activities that could also be classified as outreach or extension too, unless it is involved with scholarship. So just taking high school students to go and show them some farm organics facilities, we will not classify that as education within the framework of this program.
Well, that seems to be all of the open questions so far.
Okay, any additional questions? Drop them in the Q&A box. This is your opportunity to exhaust all your questions. And this is your opportunity to have the three of us all right here. And if we do not have any more questions, we are not going to keep people here. I know people are really busy. So with that, I'm going to say thank you again for attending this webinar. We look forward to receiving your application, but in the meantime, you have extra questions, don't hesitate to contact any of us here. And like I said at the beginning, you can always send an email and copy all of us on the email. Whoever is available will jump in and answer your question. So again, thank you so much for attending the webinar today.